Hey there guys, so I'm back with another movie review. I know I've been doing a lot of these lately and I promise you guys that I will get back to the boxing videos soon, but I'm just doing something a little bit different now and then. I've been watching a lot of movies and a lot of ideas to do some reviews, but this is going to be my last one for a while anyway. I want to be reviewing a movie that came out that in my opinion is my favorite movie from last year. Undisputed 4. Now, Undisputed 4 was directed by a Bulgarian director called Todor Chapkanov and stars Scott Adkins as Yuri Boyka. Now, anybody who is familiar with the Undisputed series will know who Yuri Boyka is. You'll know who the character is. He's a underground fighter who has spent the majority of his life in prison, and basically all this guy knows is violence. All this guy knows is how to fight. It's his only talent, it's his only skill, it's his only ambition in life. And in the previous movies, Boyka was depicted as a real sadistic individual. For example, in Undisputed 2, he was a guy who was just bloodthirsty. Okay, all he ever wanted to do was fight and was prove that he's the most complete fighter in the world. That was his quote in that movie. I'm the most complete fighter in the world. And yeah, he was the champion in the prison in Russia. And yeah, he always came across as a real nasty individual. In Undisputed 3, there was a little bit more character development. There was a little bit more of a background into his personality and into his life and into his reason why he is the way he is. And in this movie, it is a completely different tone, whereas in the previous movies, the majority of it, at least 90%, was all based around prison. In this movie, it isn't based around prison. Boyka has gained his freedom. He's still competing in the underground fighting circuit. However, it's much more legit now. He's fighting in venues. He's fighting in arenas. He's no longer fighting in prison. He's no longer a convict. He's actually living in Kiev, Ukraine. And one of the things I really like about this movie and what sets it apart from the rest of the series, this is a much more personal and story-driven experience for Yuri Boyka. The movie begins, you see him, he's out of prison, he's still competing in underground fighting, but there's a very good scene where the day after one of his fights, after he wins his money, he's donating Bibles to the church. And you get a little bit of expedition where the guy, comes up to him and he's talking about, another generous donation. So you get the sense that Boyka, he's refound his faith. He takes his faith very seriously in this movie, and that was hinted at in the previous movies, but it wasn't really explored any further. But in this movie, you really get the sense that Boyka takes his Christian faith very seriously, and he's trying to become a better person, and trying to be more at peace in this movie. He's not the real uptight psychopath that he was in the previous movies. In this movie, now that he's no longer in that prison environment and he's no longer got all that pressure on his shoulders, he's a very different person. He's a heck of a lot more laid back in this movie. Now, the plot of this movie, it's really about redemption, and that's what I like about it. It's a very different plot to the previous movies. The previous movies were, all-out action flicks, whereas this movie, like I said, it's more of a personal, story-driven movie. Yuri Boyka does something in this movie. He gets an opportunity, he gets a chance of a lifetime to become a legitimate mixed martial artist. He gets invited to take place in a tournament in Budapest, Hungary, an MMA tournament, which I believe is going to be televised. It was going to be in a big stadium, so it was a real big opportunity. But he has an obstacle to go through first. He has to win a qualifying match, and unfortunately, and the realities of the risks that take place in combat sports are really portrayed well in this movie. He has a fight, and the opponent that he defeats ends up dying, and that's the plot of this movie. And that's not a spoiler, because if you look on IMDb or any informational sites about this movie, that's the general gist of the plot. So of course Boyka, for the first time in his life, pretty much feels guilt and regrets what he did in the ring, and this then leads to him going straight into the lion's den, because he finds out that this man that he murdered, I say murdered, this man who died in the ring, he finds out that this man had a wife, and he had a family, and he had a community that really really relied on him. There were children in this community. Without spoiling too much of the plot, there were a lot of people that relied on this guy. So, and he also had a lot of debts. So Boyka, at his own risk, decides to return to Russia, where he's a wanted man, and decides to pursue this guy's wife. Originally, he just wants to give her the money from the fight and seek her forgiveness. That's what he really wants. Is he wants to seek her forgiveness. And there's a really really good scene in this movie which I really liked. I thought it was a powerful scene where he's talking to his manager, and his manager says to him, "Look, Boyka, you've got this tournament coming up. You've got a chance of a lifetime. Don't throw it away, okay? If you go through with this and you get caught, you could end up throwing your life away." And then Boyka says to his manager, "It's not this life I'm worried about." And that I really found powerful, because it really really goes to show you the faith that this man has. He's looking to save his soul. Boyka isn't like a cliche hero who is just putting his life on the line and putting everybody else before himself, this, that and the other, like a lot of heroes in a lot of movies. No, this man is out to save his soul. Okay, this man is thinking about the next life. He's thinking about all the things he's done in his life, all the sins that he's committed, and he's starting to, he's starting to realize, he's starting to wake up to that, and really really wants to be more of a good influence, and do some good deeds before his time comes, because obviously with what happened in the ring prior to that, his whole life flashed before his eyes. And there's a lot of flashbacks in this movie, a lot of brief flashbacks to the previous movies and to a few of the things that Boyka did and a few things that happened. And there is a surprising amount of character development. I really really like the way that they expanded the character in this movie. Now, let's get into the most important thing about this movie, which is of course the action. This is an action movie. There is plenty of action. How is it done? It's fantastic. The action in this movie and the stunt work in this movie is some of the best I have ever seen. Scott Adkins isn't a great actor by any means, but he is a fantastic, and I mean fantastic, martial artist and a fantastic stuntman. And just the way that the fights flow in this movie, the way that they're choreographed is fucking beautiful. Some of the best I've ever seen. There's a fight in particular where Boyka takes on two guys at once. He takes on these two brothers in a ring, and just the stunt work. Honestly, you guys need to watch this movie for these fight scenes alone. The stunt work in that particular fight was fantastic. I don't even want to describe it. You guys need to see it for yourself. It's really really well done. There's a lot of real really realistic effects. It's very bloody, this movie. There's a lot of like gritty R-rated violence. There's also a lot of fights that take place outside of the ring. Boyka has a lot of street fights in this movie against some gangsters and thugs, and he really really shows that he's a versatile fighter. In this movie, you really get the sense that Boyka's become a complete fighter, because if you guys remember in Undisputed 2, he was a great fighter when he was able to use his kicks and his flips and all that kind of stuff. But when he had to just use his hands, because there's a fight where he takes on a boxer and he says, "I'll beat you at your own game," and he had to use his hands and he gets absolutely destroyed. So he has to, revert back to what he knows, which is using kicks. And in this movie, you get the sense that he's learned from all his mistakes in the previous movies, and Boyka's just a real complete fighter in this movie. He truly is the most complete fighter in the world at this stage. And the stunt work is fantastic, the action is fantastic. Like I said, the plot is really deep, it's really emotional, really really good acting. The actors that are in this movie, they're not big actors, they're not really experienced, but they do a great job with the script they're given. The script for this movie was really really well done. There's some really really moving dialogue. I like the dialogue in this movie. I like the plot. Boyka in this movie, what's really fascinating to me about how they were able to pull this one off is because Boyka in this movie, although he's different, although he's a lot more composed in this movie and less wound up and less uptight and less like a you know, less violent than he was in the previous movies, he still feels like Boyka. He still feels like the same character. You know, he still has the "you ask too many fucking questions." You know, he still has that kind of real rough charm about him that he had in the previous movies, where you know he would just, when people talk to him and he just gets wound up. There's one scene in particular where he's in this nightclub and he's watching these guys fight in the ring, and the champion of this particular club is showboating, like fucking is beating the crap out of this guy, and he takes this guy down and then starts like shouting to the crowd saying, "This is my ring, this is my ring," you know, just being a pure cocky prick. And the way that Boyka just looks at him and shakes his head, it's like, please let me kick this guy's ass someday, which he gets the chance to do. And I really like that. There's some of that charm there, you know. There's some funny one-liners from Boyka, you know, like there was in the previous movie. So he still keeps that rough charm. You know, he still feels like the same character. It's just that he's more developed at this stage. You know, he's regretful about the things he's done in the past, and I really, really think that this movie pulled that off. I really do. The villain in the movie, now he's the owner of this nightclub, and he's also a fight promoter. You know, he organizes these underground fights. You find out throughout the movie that this guy's very well connected. He basically runs this town, you know, with an iron fist. I mean, he's the mob boss in this area. You know, he runs all the fights. He also even runs the police. I mean, this guy has the police on his payroll and everything. So this is a real manipulative, powerful, you know, really greedy individual who just won't take no for an answer. And Boyka gets roped into cutting a deal with this guy, and yeah, the guy does a lot of fucked up things in the movie, and yeah, he's a real nasty bastard. But yeah, I mean, that's what you expect from a villain anyway. He's certainly not as charming or as charismatic as previous villain in the series. Well, I don't even know if you could call him a villain, but Gaga from the previous movies, who was somewhat a villain of the second movie. You know, he's not quite as charismatic as him, but he certainly is on par with him in terms of his in how intimidating he is as a villain. The obstacles Boyka has to overcome in this film, he has to face some real serious odds. I mean, there's a guy that he faces towards the end, this real big, scary, roided up guy, this big bodybuilder type, who I can't remember the guy's name. Is it Martin Ford or something like that? But I've seen the guy in other movies. The guy was also in Accident Man, which was another movie that starred Scott Adkins. I didn't really like that movie, but that guy was in that movie too with Scott Adkins. He had a bit part. He played a henchman. But in this movie, he's this real big, scary fucking guy, this big monster that Boyka has to fight. And I mean, that fight was really, really well done. It was really well acted and well choreographed. So, yeah, I really like this movie. I think it's a fantastic action flick with a surprisingly deep and thought-provoking story. I really, really like Boyka's character in this movie. You know, like I said, look, Scott Adkins ain't a great actor. He's not. But when you give him a good script and the right character, he can pull it off, and he pulls it off here. He understands this character. He's played this character for over a decade now, so he understands how to pull Boyka off as a character. You know, he understands how to be believable in that role. And when you take into consideration the martial arts and the stunt work that he's had, I mean, Scott Adkins has worked with people like Jean-Claude Van Damme in the past. He's worked with Michael Jai White, of course. So this guy is a very, very experienced stuntman, a very experienced martial artist who really knows how to pull off fight scenes in a movie. I don't think there's anyone else in movies who can pull off fight scenes quite as good as him. So yeah, really, really great movie. I love this movie. I don't have any criticisms for this movie whatsoever, and that's rare for me to say. I like this movie probably a little bit more than I like Blood and Bone, which was a fantastic martial arts movie too. But this movie to me is probably even better. I think that this movie, you know, it's really, really surprising to think that the Undisputed series is one of the few series in the world which actually got better with time, whereas most of these action movies, when they try to make a sequel and then they try to, you know, continue on the series, it usually just gets a bit stale. But Undisputed, for whatever reason, got better and better with time. The second movie was better than the first movie. The third movie was at least as good as the second movie, and this movie, in my opinion, was even better. So yeah, it got better with time. Great movie. I really love this movie. One of my favorites. My favorite movie of last year. Like I said, the movie didn't get a theatrical release. It was a straight to video movie, and it wasn't even released here in the UK. But thankfully, I was able to buy a Blu-ray off of eBay. I bought a European import, but thankfully it has the original English audio in the options. You can switch it to its original English, so I was able to watch the movie in English. So it was great, and a great movie. Really really like the movie. I would recommend it to anybody who likes martial arts or likes action, or if you like a good drama. Check this movie out. It's great. Um, Without a doubt, my favorite movie of last year. I mean, it's such a shame that this movie didn't get a theatrical release. When a movie like another movie that Scott Adkins was in, American Assassin, which came out last year, which was garbage, and I reviewed that on my channel too if you want to check it out. That movie got a theatrical release, but this didn't. I mean, seriously, guys, it's ridiculous. But whatever, great movie, 10 out of 10. Perfect movie in my opinion. This movie was made for me, and I may have some bias because I really love the series, but whatever. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching.